Right, so get this. Back in 1881, Mark Twain himself called Montreal the city of 100 steeples.
Wow.
That's a lot of steeples, right?
It is quite a visual.
Yeah. So today we're going to go way beyond the skyline
Okay.
and try to figure out what makes this Canadian metropolis tick.
Well, and it's interesting because even before their steeples were built, Montreal was already this crossroads of cultures and history.
Huh.
For a long time, before the French even arrived, the Iroquois of the St. Lawrence, they were the ones who called the island home.
Oh, wow. So we're talking like ancient history here.
Yeah.
Like, what do we actually know about that period?
Well, so Jacques Cartier, the explorer, right?
Yeah.
He visited in 1535, and right where old Montreal stands today, he found this thriving Iroquois village
Oh, wow.
called Hochelaga. And get this, it had over 1,000 people,
Really?
and it was fortified, which, suggests a level of sophistication that I think often gets overlooked.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive for sure.
Yeah.
But okay, so if it was so well established, what happened to it? Like, where did all the Iroquois go by the time the French actually came and settled there?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Right.
It's something that historians still debate to this day.
Really?
There are theories, everything from disease to shifting alliances with other indigenous groups.
Okay.
But honestly, no one really knows for sure.
Interesting.
What we do know is that by the early 1600s, like, the whole landscape had changed completely.
Okay, so is this where the French enter the picture?
Exactly.
Okay.
With their big plans for a new world.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1642, Paul de Chaumet de Maisonneuve
Okay.
and Jean Mance, they founded Ville-Marie,
Okay.
which was this Catholic missionary colony right on that same island.
Ah.
And their goal was pretty ambitious. They wanted to create this beacon of Christianity, right in the heart of the wilderness.
Okay, so I'm sensing that was probably a little more complicated than they maybe originally thought.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
It definitely wasn't a cakewalk.
So were they met with, like, open arms, or was it kind of a little more tense?
Yeah, let's just say those early years were anything but peaceful.
Right.
We got to remember the Iroquois.
Right.
They had their own claims to the land.
Of course.
So conflict was pretty frequent.
Yeah.
Which made farming really hard, and those conversion efforts,
Right.
they were an uphill battle.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It sounds like those fortified walls that Cartier saw probably came in handy.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. But okay, so if things were so tense, how did the colony even manage to survive?
Well, it took a lot of perseverance and, frankly, a lot more, religious reinforcements.
Okay.
So in 1659, Sister Marguerite Bourgeois arrived.
Okay.
And she established the Congregation of Notre Dame.
Mm.
And this wasn't just about, faith. It was about actually building a community.
Right.
So schools, hospitals, all the things that helped make Montreal a little bit more permanent.
So those 100 steeples that Mark Twain was talking about,
Yeah.
they weren't just there for looks, I'm guessing.
No, not at all.
They represented something a lot deeper.
They really do. It's a story of resilience.
Yeah.
Of this community that was just determined to, like, make its mark,
Right.
even when things were really, really tough.
Yeah, but like with any good story, there's always a twist coming, right?
Oh, of course.
So what happened to kind of shake things up?
Well, we can't forget that, the world around them was also changing.
Right.
In 1760, during the 7 Years' War,
Mhm.
Montreal fell to the British.
Wow. Okay, so that's got to be a big change.
Huge. It was a huge shift.
So more than just like a change of flags.
Oh, yeah. It went way beyond that. It was cultural, economic.
So what impact did this British takeover actually have on the city?
Well, so imagine, like, this wave of new merchants coming in.
Okay.
The fur trade just explodes.
Right.
And then you have figures like James McGill.
Oh, as in that McGill University.
That's the one.
Wow.
And then Simon McTavish, who was one of the founders of this super powerful Northwest companies. And all of a sudden, Montreal's destiny is being shaped by this whole new group of people.
And I'm guessing that didn't always go over so well.
Right.
With the, existing French Catholic community and all these new English Protestants.
You're picking up on it.
Yeah.
It wasn't exactly a polite disagreement.
Right.
Like, this clash of cultures, it simmered for decades.
Oh, wow.
And eventually it boiled over in the rebellions of 1837 to 1838.
Okay, hold on, back up for a second. Can you remind us what those rebellions were all about?
Yeah.
And like what made them so important?
So imagine a population that's feeling more and more marginalized.
Okay.
Their language, their customs are under pressure.
Yeah.
So the rebellions were this kind of desperate attempt to assert their identity, and fight for a little autonomy.
Yeah.
They didn't win in the end,
Okay.
militarily, I mean.
Right.
But they definitely left their mark on Montreal.
So even in defeat, they shaped the city's character.
Absolutely. It's this reminder that Montreal's path, it was never easy or simple.
Right.
But while all this cultural turmoil is happening, there's this other force that's starting to shape the city too.
Okay, what's that?
The Industrial Revolution.
Okay, so we're switching gears here a little bit.
We are.
From, cultural clashes to like smokestacks and factories and things like that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Bustling ports, the sound of trains, the rumble of construction.
Yeah.
The 19th century was just this time of crazy growth. Montreal becomes a critical hub for trade with the whole Great Lakes region.
Wow.
And this major railway center.
So this is where those huge engineering projects that we were reading about come in, right?
Yeah.
The Lachine Canal, the Victoria Bridge.
Got it.
Okay.
So the Lachine Canal was finished in 1824.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, it bypassed the Lachine Rapids, which were super dangerous.
Right.
So it made trade a lot more efficient.
Okay.
And then in 1860, you've got the Victoria Bridge,
Yeah.
which was this incredible feat of engineering.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It connected Montreal to the rest of the continent by rail.
Right.
So these weren't just like building projects.
Right.
It was a statement.
Yeah.
It turned Montreal into this booming industrial powerhouse.
So I'm sensing another but coming.
Well, yeah.
Right, like with all this growth.
Yeah.
Montreal was unstoppable at this point, right?
Montreal's story is never that simple.
Right, of course.
Progress often comes with a price.
Yeah.
Like, think about the smallpox epidemic in 1885.
Oh, right.
It was devastating. Almost 2% of the population was wiped out.
Wow.
It's a pretty stark reminder that even in the good times, there were always challenges lurking around the corner.
That is a pretty stark contrast, like all this booming industry on one hand.
Yeah.
And then this horrible disease on the other.
Yeah.
So how did they navigate those two things at the same time?
Well, and that navigation's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
But I think before we dive into the 20th century,
Yeah.
let's just take a second to appreciate everything we've talked about.
Okay, yeah, good point. We've gone from, ancient Iroquois villages to like this city.
I know, it's pretty amazing.
That's on the verge of like a whole new era.
Yeah.
And it seems like Montreal's DNA, is just made up of this resilience and ambition and a little bit of drama.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And that DNA is what makes Montreal's journey into the 20th century so fascinating.
All right, so I guess that's the story for next time then.
Definitely.
Okay, so we left off with Montreal like right on the edge of the 20th century.
Yeah.
A city that had already seen a ton of change and upheaval.
Oh, yeah.
But I have a feeling things are about to get even more interesting.
You have no idea.
Right.
The 20th century for Montreal, it was like this pressure cooker, like a time of just these huge social and economic and cultural shifts.
Yeah.
It's almost hard to even know where to start.
Well, our sources mention that Montreal became like this financial hub.
Right.
So did all that industry in the 19th century kind of set the stage for that?
Absolutely. Like by the early 1900s, Montreal was the place to do business in Canada.
Really?
Yeah, banks, insurance companies, you name it. They were all flocking to the city because of its location.
Yeah.
And its growing industrial base.
It's like a Wall Street North kind of thing?
Exactly.
Okay, cool. But were there any downsides to this like financial boom?
Well, with any kind of rapid growth, there are always growing pains.
Right.
Social inequalities started to widen. And the city's infrastructure, it really struggled to keep up with all the new people and businesses.
Yeah, that makes sense. But then something happened that I don't think anyone really expected.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
Do you remember Prohibition?
Oh, yeah. In the States.
Yeah, exactly. So while the U.S. was like cracking down on booze,
Right.
Montreal was having a party.
They were.
Seriously, Montreal basically became like a party city.
You could say that.
Wow.
Think jazz clubs, speakeasies, and just a very relaxed attitude toward the law.
Huh. So Americans were heading north to have a good time.
Oh, yeah, they were flocking north.
And Montreal's like, come on in.
Yeah, basically.
So even under British rule, they still had that little rebellious streak.
Oh, for sure.
Which kind of seems to be a theme in Montreal's story.
Definitely.
But all good things must come to an end eventually.
Right.
So what happened when Prohibition was over?
Well, I mean, Montreal's party didn't just stop overnight.
Right.
But I think the city was smart enough to realize that it needed to diversify its economy,
Yeah.
beyond just finance and entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the world kind of got plunged into chaos with 2 world wars.
Right. I can only imagine what those global conflicts did to a city like Montreal.
Yeah, they had a huge impact.
Yeah.
On the one hand, there was a lot of economic hardship,
Right.
but then you also had this surge in industrial production.
Okay.
Montreal's factories were churning out all this stuff for the war effort.
Right. So it was a time of sacrifice, but also like resilience and
Exactly.
ingenuity. So they were like flexing their industrial muscle again.
Yeah.
But what about all the social changes that were happening within Quebec itself?
Right.
Like, wasn't this around the time of the Quiet Revolution?
Yes. That started in the 1960s.
Yeah.
And it was a really pivotal moment.
Yeah.
It challenged the power of the Catholic Church
Right.
and advocated for a much more secular and modern Quebec society.
So how did that actually play out in Montreal specifically?
Well, Montreal was really at the forefront of this whole transformation.
Okay.
The city just exploded with new ideas.
Wow.
There was a flourishing arts and culture scene and this growing sense of, Quebecois identity.
Yeah.
It was a time of questioning and pushing boundaries
Yeah.
and really redefining what it meant to be a Montrealer.
So like a real cultural awakening.
Yeah, exactly.
And all this was happening just as Montreal was getting ready to step onto the world stage.
You're right, because in 1967, Montreal hosted Expo 67.
Oh yeah, Expo 67.
The World's Fair.
I've seen pictures of it.
Oh, yeah.
Those designs were amazing.
They were incredible.
So what kind of legacy did that event leave on the city?
Oh, Expo 67 left a huge mark on Montreal.
Yeah.
Both physically and, kind of in its spirit.
Right.
We still have those iconic structures, like the biosphere,
Right.
which is a symbol of environmental awareness,
Yeah.
and Habitat 67,
Yeah.
which is that really experimental housing complex.
Yeah. It's so clear.
That still inspires architects today.
But I mean, it was more than just buildings, right?
Oh, for sure.
Expo 67 really instilled this sense of pride in Montreal.
Yeah.
This belief that the city could achieve anything.
Absolutely.
It sounds like a really pivotal moment.
It was.
A real turning point.
Yeah.
But then the 1970s hit,
Oh.
and things got a little complicated again.
Yeah, the 1970s were a bit of a roller coaster for Montreal.
Okay.
A decade of triumph and tragedy.
Yeah.
On the one hand, they hosted the Summer Olympics in 1976.
Right. Another chance to show off to the world. But then there was the October crisis.
Yeah, that was a really dark time.
It was, can you just remind us what happened and how it affected Montreal?
So in 1970, this group of Quebec separatists,
Okay.
the FLQ,
Okay.
they kidnapped a British diplomat and a Quebec cabinet minister.
Oh, wow.
It was this really tense standoff,
Yeah.
and tragically, the cabinet minister was killed,
Right.
and then the government invoked the War Measures Act,
Okay.
which was really controversial
Yeah.
because it suspended a lot of civil liberties.
So Montreal was kind of at the center of all this.
It was.
And it must have felt the impact really deeply.
Oh, definitely. There was a lot of fear and uncertainty.
Yeah.
It felt like the city's stability, that they had worked so hard for,
Right.
was suddenly really fragile.
So you had this time of celebration and international recognition,
Yeah.
and then at the same time, all this political turmoil.
It was a strange time.
So how did Montreal cope with those two things at the same time?
Well, that's the thing about Montreal. They're incredibly adaptable.
Okay.
They always find a way to reinvent themselves.
Hmm.
So even with all the challenges of the 1970s, the city kept evolving.
Okay.
And it was during this decade that the sovereignty movement really gained momentum.
Right.
And it eventually led to those 2 referendums on Quebec independence.
Oh, yeah. Those are close.
They were nail-biters.
It must have been a really tense time for everyone,
Oh, definitely.
no matter what side they were on.
Yeah.
But how did all this political stuff actually impact Montreal economically?
Well, all the uncertainty about Quebec's future,
Right.
it definitely took its toll.
Yeah.
Businesses were hesitant to invest.
Mm-hmm.
Some even moved to other provinces.
Really?
And, Montreal's position as Canada's economic powerhouse,
Right.
it started to slip.
Okay, but even with all that going on,
Yeah.
the city's entrepreneurial spirit, it was still there.
Oh, yeah, it never went away.
Okay.
Montrealers, they always find a way,
Yeah.
They make the best of a situation. They come up with these creative solutions and forge these new paths.
Which brings us to Montreal today,
Yeah.
a city that's gone through so much,
Oh, yeah.
but it just comes out stronger each time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really interested to hear how those themes of resilience and innovation
Yeah.
are shaping the 21st century version of Montreal. It's amazing to think about everything we've talked about,
Mm.
from ancient villages to this modern city dealing with like economic shifts and crazy political stuff.
Yeah, it's a wild ride.
It is. But it seems like Montreal's really good at reinventing itself.
They are.
And what's so cool to me is how all those layers of history are still there in the city today.
Oh, yeah, it's true. Like, you can't walk around Old Montreal without feeling that French history, you know?
Yeah.
Or go through the Quartier Latin without feeling that energy from the Quiet Revolution.
Yeah, I totally get that. But what really strikes me is how they've taken all that history and blended it with this like forward-thinking perspective.
Right.
So what are some examples of that?
Well, for one, Montreal is like this hub of innovation, like especially in fields like AI and video game development. They're attracting all this top talent from around the world.
Oh.
And their universities are producing these graduates who are like pushing the boundaries of technology.
So it's not just about preserving the past. It's about like building a future that's rooted in these cutting-edge industries.
Exactly.
Which makes sense considering their history of embracing change and adapting to new challenges. What else makes Montreal stand out in the 21st century?
Well, one thing that's really impressive is their commitment to sustainability.
Okay.
They've made some major progress in reducing their environmental impact.
Yeah.
They have an amazing public transportation system, a huge network of bike paths, and they're doing all these cool things with urban farming.
Oh, yeah, those rooftop greenhouses.
Yeah, exactly.
I read about them. It's so cool how they're growing fresh produce right in the middle of the city.
It's a great example of how they're dealing with these modern challenges, you know?
Yeah.
Coming up with these creative solutions.
And speaking of creative, we can't forget about the cultural scene in Montreal.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I mean, the city is practically synonymous with festivals, music, and art.
Right. It's like there's always something going on no matter what time of year it is.
It really is. So whether it's just for laughs or the jazz festival or all those art galleries and performance spaces,
Yeah.
Montreal really embraces creativity in all its forms.
We do.
And that diversity of expression seems to go hand in hand with its multicultural population, right?
Oh, absolutely. Montreal is home to people from over 200 different cultural communities.
Really?
Which makes it one of the most diverse cities in North America.
Wow.
And a full third of Montrealers are immigrants. So they bring with them this incredible mix of languages and traditions and perspectives.
Those are some pretty impressive stats. It sounds like Montreal is this true melting pot.
It is.
Where different cultures not only coexist, but they like actually make each other richer.
Yeah. And the coolest thing is, despite all this change and growth, Montreal has still managed to hold on to its unique charm and character.
That's true. It has this certain something, you know?
Right.
Like this blend of European sophistication and North American energy.
Yeah, it's hard to describe.
Yeah. But you definitely feel it when you're there.
You do.
It's like you can be walking down these cobblestone streets lined with historic buildings 1 minute.
Yeah.
And then stumble upon some crazy art installation or a bustling market the next.
It's a city of contrasts, for sure.
It is. It's always surprising.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a Mark Twain quote we started with. You know, the city of 100 steeples.
Yeah.
But there's so much more to it than just those steeples.
There it is.
It's this story that's both grand and personal.
Yeah.
You know? It's all about resilience and innovation and this love for the good things in life, whether it's art or food or just having a good conversation at a cafe.
I think that's what makes Montreal so appealing, you know? It's a city that embraces both its past and its future.
Totally. It's like history is whispering in your ear while you're walking around.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the possibilities feel endless.
Exactly.
This deep dive has been amazing. I feel like I learned so much about Montreal.
Good. I'm glad.
Even though I thought I knew a lot already.
Yeah.
I'm walking away with this whole new appreciation for the city.
That's great.
You know, its complexity, its resilience, and its spirit.
That's the beauty of a deep dive, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like an invitation to go deeper, you know, to uncover the hidden layers of a place and its people.
Yeah.
And to come away with a richer understanding and wanting to learn even more.
So to our listener, we encourage you to keep exploring, you know.
Yeah.
Dive into Montreal's history, immerse yourself in its culture, discover those hidden gems.
Yeah, go experience it for yourself.
And as you do, just remember the stories we've shared today. They really reveal the heart and soul of this amazing city.
Because by understanding Montreal's past, we can truly appreciate its present and imagine its incredible future.
I think that's a perfect way to end this deep dive.
I agree.